This is Jill Bartholomew, host of the Be Fierce Multisport podcast, and welcome to episode 5. Today, we're going to be talking to 4 age groupers who volunteered to appear on our show today. The topic we're going to be talking about is on your first Ironman, what was your learnings? Like, what did you take away? What did you learn that you didn't expect? And we have quite a range of experiences here. From a 70.3 training for their first Ironman, all the way up to having done many Ironman over many decades. A lot of range of experience today. I'm super excited about this conversation. Just quick introduction. We have Kamil from the Czech Republic, Jenn, Justin, both from Orlando, who met on this podcast. We've already made some connections. And Wendy, I don't recall where you're joining us from.
Marietta, Georgia.
Orlando, Georgia, Philadelphia, and the Czech Republic represented. So I'm super excited. So we've all done at least the 70.3. Most of us have done at least one full Ironman. I know when I did my first one, there was so many things I didn't expect to happen on the course, right? I had trained for like 9 months, a year. I'd done at that point, probably 4 or 5 halves, God knows how many tries. And, my triathlon career started as a marathoner. I'm like the classic triathlete. I was a marathoner who broke her leg and became a triathlete. It's like half the triathletes are injured runners, right? For me personally, when I did my first full, it was in Lake Placid, which, it was really close to where I grew up. I'm from Saratoga, New York. So doing Lake Placid was like going home. I grew up like speed skating on the oval. So that was like coming down that first finish line was so emotional. But for me, it was the run. It was that, I transitioned my first mile off the bike was at like 5:50 or something stupid like that. And then by the time I made it to like mile 16, the mortal hydration was taking its toll on me. And dealt with that for the last like 10 miles or so. And then my watch died at mile 20. And I'm the one who's sitting there running by people like, hey, what's your pace? Because I don't know what mine is. So that was fascinating. But I'm interested. So, Wendy, you've been doing this longer than the rest of us. You were just telling us before we started recording about your first one in Kona, before it was Kona as we know it today. You want to tell us about that and how it went?
So yeah, thank you for having me on. I love talking about Ironman, especially my first one, because it was back in 1997, and I was 24 years old. And I'll back up. I actually qualified in 1995 at a race called Springfield, Illinois. And I declined. I didn't even know what Kona was. I just did this race. It was almost a half Ironman distance. I grew up in Michigan. And I said, no, I don't even know what that is. And then I made it a goal of saying, okay, I want to qualify while I'm still in this 20 or 18 to 24 age group. So then I moved to Colorado, went to a race. It was called the Desert Sun Half Ironman. There wasn't a 70.3 yet. And I qualified, and it was like 90 degrees. I had half a water bottle. I cramped at mile 12 of the half marathon, and I crossed the finish line saying, no way am I ever going to double this distance, because I didn't know anything about fueling. But of course, I got a slot, and I went. And I recall the race was about 12 weeks after I qualified in Kona.
Wow,
so
that's very close.
It was very close, yeah. So I went alone, like 9 days before the race. I was there alone. My dad flew out the day before. I had no concept of nutrition yet. And I ran into my friend that I used to race in Michigan. So I started triathlon in 1992. So I ran into a girlfriend of mine who I used to race from in Michigan. And I said, well, what do you do? Eating and drinking. And she told me. So I followed her guidelines, like 3 days before the race. I had my first GU at mile 2 of my very first marathon. And it worked, like everything, my nutrition, at least I knew enough that I needed to eat and drink. And back then I used to probably have 100 grams of carbohydrate at least an hour. I kind of overdid it because that's what I was worried about. And it worked for me. I mean, I got lucky that, don't try anything new race day. And I tried a lot of new things race
I
day.
was going to say, trying a goo on race day for the first time is very, very bold.
Well, who knew? I mean, in the 90s, there was really I didn't find much education, no coaching.
No, it didn't exist, especially for endurance athletes.
Right. And so vanilla bean goo became my food of choice for many, many years because I could tolerate it. I loved when Gatorade was a sponsor because I could tolerate Gatorade. Again, I didn't train with any of this stuff. I used to come home from training sessions thinking I was bonked, but I was more dehydrated than anything else. And then I would just stuff my face with food because I didn't eat enough while I was training. So, key takeaways was I always recommend don't try anything new race day unless you don't have anything else. I mean, I had no really choice because I didn't know. It was my first marathon, so I was scared to death. My longest run before that was 16 miles, so I didn't know what was going to happen to me after 16 miles. So literally my mind was, what's going to happen to me at 16 miles? What's going to happen to me? Am I going to bonk at mile 20? Because that's what you learn when you train for marathons, that you could hit the wall at mile 20. And none of that ever happened to me. And I think it was just because the whole race, I was super focused on hydration and nutrition, that not knowingly prevented me from hitting the wall. And the marathon ended up being the best part of the whole race. And I'm a swimmer. I'm a former collegiate swimmer. So running was very, very difficult for me.
Okay. It's rare that you hear people, especially on their first one, and we were talking before, right? I do a lot of the runs at Disney too, including Dopey, right? And it's like I see the same with like the Dopey challenge, which has a marathon component, and Ironmans, which have a marathon component. I see a lot of people who are doing their first one and it's their first marathon. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, wow, that's brave.
Again, I had no choice. I qualified and I had to get ready in 3 months. And I was injured very quickly. I was injured very quickly because before I qualified, I was probably running 15 to 20 miles a week. I remember like 2 weeks before I'm at that half, I ran 13 miles just to just to know I could run 13 miles. And then I qualified. I'm all excited. Didn't really know what to do other than I love to train. And I bumped my miles up to 40 miles. And I was quickly injured for leading up to that first Ironman, first marathon. I learned how to aqua jog. I had a friend who took me under his wing for those final 8 weeks, and he showed me how to aqua jog. So again, another key takeaway, with all the cross training and aqua jogging, I showed up to the race healthy. Like I didn't try to push through the pain I was in. I just cross-trained with deep water aqua jogging back in 1997. I still do it to this day for really injury prevention. And it worked for me. So, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity.
So it's funny that the episode that we just published last week was actually about injury prevention and rehabilitation.
Huh?
Like, is a triathlete, is an endurance athlete really an athlete if they don't have a orthopedist and a physical therapist on speed dial? Right? I mean, if you've never been injured,
you will be. You're either an athlete that will be injured or you were injured.
Yeah. I'm like, it feels like a constant battle to prevent injuries. So, Justin, you just raced Texas. I just raced Texas. We somehow missed each other while we were out there. How'd it go? And was that your first?
No. So that was
an emphatic no right there.
No. I love this sport. Oh, I do. That was my 8th full.
Okay.
Yeah,
definitely not your first then.
Yeah, been to Worlds once. I'm trying to get back. I'm in that fun age group zone where I might have to consider quitting my day job to do this full time.
Hey, that's what I did. I quit my day job. I started a business. I took a significant pay cut.
For the sport, it seems very tempting. No doubt about it.
Yeah. So tell me about Texas. How'd it go?
Texas was great. I mean, I got run course was spectacular. I mean, what can I say? I mean, I love a good sport, where the spectators are out there and bringing the energy and Hippie Hollow. I'm sure anyone who looks into the course.
My pace is like a solid minute and a half faster through Hippie Hollow.
I will tell you for first timers and things like that, we got that notification. I think 5:15 in the morning, somewhere in there, that wetsuits were
Yes.
going to disqualify you from age group awards. So you have that moment when you're in line and you see all these people. It's like, should I wear a wetsuit? Should I not wear a wetsuit? That
And
it's
so
point
the
0.6
question is,
degrees over.
did you wear a wetsuit?
I did not.
You
I
did not.
I went with the speed suit.
So
And
I heard from a lot of people, including a couple of pros, and it mirrored my own experience. This was the worst, bar none, Ironman swim I have done. Period.
it was, yeah.
It
The
was
current was
brutal.
rough coming out of the
It was
canal.
brutal, and it shouldn't have been. It was a calm lake. It's a lake swim. It's gross. The water's not awesome. But I heard one person describe it as swimming through cement.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I thought the view, if you poke your head up for a moment, just for spotting purposes, I thought it was beautiful, and the water temperature I
The view was
enjoyed.
great.
Yeah. But it was definitely a little bit of a murkier swim, no question about it.
Yeah.
But all the same, for so many of these, I'm really finding that point of enjoyment in the sport, especially if you're there to have a good time, if you're there to compete against yourself. I really just finding that happy place in all three disciplines, and not to mention the transition.
So I hadn't seen this in other races I've done.
Mhm.
They had that arch halfway through the swim.
Yeah.
And I was like, that better not be the halfway point.
No.
And
I've seen.
I'm like, that there's no way that's just the halfway point, right?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, Jill, because my stomping grounds were originally Lake Placid as well. And they had an arch, and this is what kind of freaked me out on the swim specifically, is that in Lake Placid, when I did Lake Placid, they had a timing belt, a timing arch incorporated into the course for that particular year. And so every athlete had to go through the arch so their timing chip would happen. I thought momentarily that arch was the same thing, like at a halfway point or something, but it wasn't. And this particular arch, and I thought it was, especially for anyone who's interested looking at the course, it seemed that there were it was kind of a space for people to hang if they needed to rest for a moment or two.
Yeah, it seemed like it was really just a marker for the athletes that,
Yeah.
hey, you're halfway done.
Yeah.
Like you said, Lake Placid, now you get out of the water, walk across the beach like 100 feet, and then get back in. So you cross 2 timing mats, and in between the timing mats is like a water table, which I think is great. So like I know a lot of people are doing Lake Placid this year as their first race, which is awesome. But like it has that where most races you don't. You don't get out of the water. This is the first one other than Lake Placid that I've been at where there's any kind of, unless you're counting buoys, that there's any kind of indication that you've reached that halfway mark.
Right. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, absolutely. And so that was kind of nice in the water, though. And then, of course, the bike, having that wind coming up from the coast when I think you're headed south, but the wind is going north. And so you definitely feel that headed down into Houston.
So roughly how long was your swim?
Roughly speaking, I did it in about an hour and 27, I think. 27 and change.
Okay.
So
you probably hit your first lap, the wind wasn't too bad.
No.
The second lap, it was like a slap in the face.
Well, and I gotta tell you something, Jill. I don't know if you got to see this out there, and for everyone else listening, and this happens, of course, during Ironman, there was a major obstruction on this particular Ironman.
You mean the upside down concrete truck? That one?
Yes, that upside down concrete truck, and that when you're going through that lap, and you have the officials out there going, "Move over, move over."
When I got there, so I finished my first lap. I was riding largely with the men on their second lap, right? The pro men, a lot of them were kind of riding, the same time. I did get to see Taylor on her bike, which was pretty awesome. I forget the girl's name, F19. That's all I remember. F19 was in front of me for several miles. I think it was F19 or F16. Pretty pink, purpley, like color shifting speed concept, and she fell right in front of me on the turn. But coming down that first lap, no concrete truck.
Mm-hmm.
And then did the turnaround, And all of a sudden, coming back, and it's like, what, 4-6 miles from the turnaround? And all of a sudden, like, when you were coming down the horizon, I'm like, the heck's that? Like what's going on here? There's like the road looks different.
Yeah.
And as you get closer, you're like, there's a vehicle in the road upside down. And then you get closer and you're like, holy crap. There's an upside down concrete truck with a car underneath it that went through the concrete barricade. And like, this isn't like the barricades that they like lift in place, like, the pre-made ones in construction zones. No. This is like they poured the concrete barrier. Totally broken. There was like suitcase-sized chunks of concrete. There was a car windshield in front of me in my lane, but it had just happened. There was no EMS, no EMT. There was no race officials, no nothing. Just 4 cyclists on the side of the road, wondering what just happened to them, and the rest of us like going at a crawl to navigate through all the debris that was on the ground to get through it. That's the most bizarre thing. And I hate to say it because it's like really sad. I'm like, the thing that went through my head was, oh gosh, I hope they're not going to stop the race. Then after that, it's like, oh, I hope everyone was okay. And I don't know if you heard, I heard from, so afterwards we're talking to Scott DeRue, the Ironman CEO, in the like VIP tent area. And he was telling us that both the driver of the concrete truck and the driver of the car that the concrete truck was on top of, both of them were okay.
Oh, I did not hear that. And I'm very glad to hear it, because that was quite the.
Yeah, I know that was the conversation on the run course when I was, at least the people around me on the run course was like, oh my God. It's like, what else do we have to talk about for 26.2 miles? Is that upside down concrete truck that no one's ever seen or expected? It's like every race brings something new, but like that was a first. I've never seen that one before.
Part of the joy of the sport, you always get to learn something new.
Okay, so aside from the bike that kind of slapped you in the face with the wind on the second lap, and for our listeners who haven't done Texas, the bike course at Texas is on paper a really easy, fun, fast bike course. It's 19 miles through neighborhoods with a couple of turns, not too many, from transition to the highway. And then it's 21 miles down, 21 miles back. And then you do it again. And then you got roughly 10 miles from the highway back to T2. So like on paper, it's super fast. And for the pros, it was super fast. Taylor Knibb set a new Ironman record for the bike for the women. And Kat Matthews did not set a record for the bike, but it set a world record for overall Ironman distance finish time for the women. And the men also set a course record. So like it was a fast day for the pros. But this particular course has an interesting dynamic, that Justin, you were alluding to it, is like the wind. The wind start early in the day is pretty calm. And as the day goes on, it's, as the tides shift, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And then around 1 p.m., it starts to kind of come back down. And so for most of the age groupers, our first lap, we had like mild wind, like 5 to 7 miles an hour. But on our second lap, as we approached noon and 1 o'clock, the wind was hitting in the 20s, 25, 27 miles an hour. I know for me, I don't know if you saw the same thing. It sounded like we're probably a couple minutes apart on the bike. For me, there was points where I was putting out like, double my FTP and moving 10 miles an hour slower than I was on the first lap.
Yes, but
just because
you get to flip around, and then you get that back and more in a sense.
Well, and that's the funny thing is like on the return, the direction the wind was, we were actually kind of almost like hitting a headwind in both directions. It felt like the most bizarre thing because I'm like, oh, we'll get a tailwind. And I was faster on the return than I was on, going out the first lap. I was faster coming back than I was going out. But it was still slower than I was on my first lap with no wind.
Really? So it really kind of picked up then at that point.
Oh, yeah.
I was definitely feeling the tail on the flip, which I really,
I was hoping for that. And like, I don't know, going out, I was like 22, 24 miles an hour average. Coming back the first time I was like 27. And then like going out the second time I was like 17 and a half. And then coming back I was like 22. So it wasn't like
17 and a half that's pretty good on that second lap.
good.
I don't know. There was points where I was struggling just to get up to 15 or 16 at points where it was really coming in.
Yeah. Well, you know how when you upload it to Strava, it tells you like how terribly you did. It's like congratulations, 60-minute power PR, your FTP change. And I'm like, no, that's wind. That was wind. Because at the end of the first lap, I was like, oh, this is great. It's gonna be like a 4-hour, 40-minute bike.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get back, I'm like, oh my God, it's like 5-hour 10 or something. And it was all that wind. Like the difference is the wind. It was brutal. All right.
Definitely, and the humidity too.
Well, you're from Florida, so you should be used to humidity.
I mean, fairly recent, but yes. Yeah, but still, it's still Ironman humidity.
Yeah. So before we move on, so I did hear a number of people like beating themselves up the next day at the awards. And there's a lot of DNFs in this race. It looked like it was close to 20 pounds, which is pretty high. I talked to a lot of people who DNF'd on the bike, a few people who DNF'd from the bike to the run, like pulled themselves, like they made the cutoffs, but they're just like, I can't do this anymore. And I said to a few people on the run course, I'm like, you got like 10 hours to get through this marathon. And, they're like, we all reach in these Ironman, like we reach that like pit of doom in our soul. And it's like, man, by the time you've reached the marathon, you have motivated your butt through your own power to go, 100 and at that point, 113 miles, 114 miles. And it's like that in and of itself is like, it's another 26. You already got 114. So Jenn, tell us about yourself. What was your first Ironman?
First one was Chattanooga. So I've done Chattanooga twice. I've done Texas twice. So I know
Chattanooga's a good one. I love that downstream swim.
Great swim, a little bit hilly for a Florida girl on the bike, but that's okay.
That's true. Have you done Haines City, the half there?
I have not. I volunteered at that race, but I haven't done it yet.
So that's I've been doing that as like my end of season race. And it's a fun race, and the medal doubles as an ornament. But I swear they found every hill in Florida and put it on that course.
There's only one section of Florida like that, and yes, they put the race there.
Right. I'm like, you go to Florida. How did you get 2,000 feet of elevation in Florida? When I first saw the elevation map for that one, I was like, what did they do? Put every overpass in the area on the course? So Chattanooga and Texas. So what were your experiences there?
Right. So, Chattanooga was great as my first one. I had friends that I trained with. My husband was doing it as well, which made it super special. Great swim. As you said, it's downriver, which is fantastic. Get out on the bike.
Now, when you did it still have the upriver component, or is it had it already changed to downriver?
No, it was downriver. Yeah, downriver. So great swim, beautiful swim. Swimming is my strength, so I loved it. It was fun. Caught some current and went. The bike, I would say it was steady. It was back when the course, I think they've changed it recently, but it was the extra mile. So it was 116 miles.
I saw something on Facebook. It was posted by Triathlon Joe. So I don't know if it's trustworthy or not, but rumor is that they've gone back to the old bike course.
Really? Interesting.
It's a rumor. I don't know if it's true. I guess we'll find out when they eventually publish the athlete.
Right. What's a few more miles on the bike? It's fine.
Well, isn't that the joke with that bike that it's always like 2 miles long? So downstream swim is your strong suit.
Yep. Bike, just steady, just wanted to get through it and got onto the run. And I felt actually really great on the run. And I caught my husband at about mile 13, about halfway through. He had not had the best race and was struggling. And so I made the decision to walk with him the rest of the race because, listen, it was the first race. Anything you do on your first race is a PR. So we just walked it in together and finished the race. I think I beat him by 1 second technically, but we came in together. We finished it. It was special. You
sacrificed your race so that he could get that bling.
Right.
You should at least be allowed to cross first.
He has been my Sherpa for many years since that point.
My husband tells people he's a professional Sherpa at this point.
It is a thing for sure. But being the first one, I think anyone who is thinking about doing their first one, that red carpet moment is just so special every time you do it. It never gets old. And I think that that's one thing as a first timer, like to soak in that moment is so important, no matter who you're with, and not
as a first timer, don't forget to ring the bell.
And the bell, right?
Gotta ring the bell.
But don't just plow through the end of it and sprint unless you're trying to meet some type of time goal. But to me, it's just such a special moment to hit that red carpet and to soak it in and to enjoy it. So yeah, I've done since Chattanooga, I've done 7 fulls since then and just keep coming back for more.
Sorry, I lost my voice over the weekend and I've been like all day, I've been like, please be able to talk in a somewhat normal voice. So this is what you guys get. On Sunday, my kids were making fun of me because I was squeaking. They're like, I don't know what you're saying, but it's really funny. So Kamil, so you've done a 70.3, you're training for a full. What 70.3 did you do?
I did the Oceanside this year. That was my first triathlon. I've done a few marathons before, and I just wanted a little bit of more of a challenge. So that's why I signed up for the Ironman 70.3. And, a little bit different than Wendy when she showed up, to the race back in the day, but there wasn't that much information. I have social media and YouTube, so I watched 1,000 videos about Ironman training, nutrition. I used ChatGPT to help me too.
not ChatGPT. As a coach, I'm like, please don't do that.
I think if you're someone that has no information, it definitely is a great starting point. So I over-prepared, which I usually do. And
so how'd you do?
I got 5 hours, 28 minutes, which was way faster than I thought I could do.
It's very respectable. And so that was your first one. How'd you feel when you crossed the finish line?
Yes, I actually finally for the first time paced myself, because during all my marathons, I would always bonk at some point. But the Ironman, I paced myself perfectly and I finished strong. I still had energy and I had fun the whole time. And I realized that's a better way to race than to kill yourself, and then struggle towards the end.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on your goal, right? Beforehand we were talking about, you said, well, I'm not really an age grouper. I'm an amateur. I'm like, isn't that the definition of an age grouper? We're not pros. We're not getting paid for this. We don't get to rack our bikes in the special corral with the red carpet. And, but we also don't have to deal with Race Ranger either, which, I think's positive. So what was your takeaway aside from you could have raced harder?
Yes, I could have raced a little bit harder. The things that surprised me the most was probably swimming with so many people, and bumping into people bumping into you, grabbing your feet. That was kind of interesting. I wasn't struggling in there, but it was definitely throwing me off of my pool swims where, I have perfectly flat water and every stroke is nice. Over there, I would, every third, fourth stroke, I get bumped by someone and then just get thrown off my rhythm. So that was definitely something that surprised me. And then during the bike, there were in Oceanside, there's few no pass zones and speed limits.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of people around those no pass zones and speed limits, probably because I'm not that good of a swimmer. So I was with the slower bikers too. And there was just no other way than to somehow get around people because it was a clump of people in a no pass zone. That was kind of surprising to me. I wasn't sure how to deal with it.
I haven't done Oceanside. How long is the no pass zone?
It's not long. It's maybe you get through it in a minute, 2.
Okay.
But there's a lot of people at once. And for some reason, people slow down in the no pass zone instead of just keeping their speed.
Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
But I mean, one of the benefits of being a slow swimmer is you get to pass all the slow cyclists.
Yes, and it's so much fun.
Which then at least makes you feel better. I remember for me, when I did my first 70.3, when I did my first triathlon, the swim, I'm a adult onset swimmer. So I've learned. So Jenn, I have not, or at least I wasn't a competent swimmer. And I got out and had like that like emotional reaction to transition being like 80% empty. But on the bike course, you get to make up for it.
Yes, the bike course was so much fun. And I'm in Las Vegas right now. That's where I've been training. And we have Red Rock National Park here, which has a big hill. So I'm used to training on a hill. And so when I got to the hill in Oceanside, it was no big deal for me. And I passed a lot of people on the hill. But it was great, yeah. Passing a lot of people on the bike. And then when I got to the run, I think I was around people's same speed.
So how long are you in Vegas? Long enough to sign up for the T100 coming up?
It's the same day as Las Vegas Marathon, which I might do, or the same weekend. So I'm not sure if it'll work out, but I would love to.
Come on, between the two, the T100.
It definitely. It would be more fun, but I might have to do the Las Vegas Marathon. Are you coming here for the team?
No, I have too many races. I'm doing like Placid again, and I'm doing Happy Valley and Chattanooga. So like 3 right in a row. I can't fit it in the schedule and, have my children not disown me.
So since you guys have experience with so many full tries, the full Ironmans, which one would you guys suggest as the first one?
Oh, that's such a great question. There's 5 people. We're going to have 5 different answers, maybe more.
What I've been thinking is, there's no easy Ironman. People think, a downriver swim, it's going to be easy Ironman. No, there's always an element of weather that makes Ironmans tough. You guys talked about the wind, the heat. I always tell athletes, even if you are racing a flat course, expect wind, heat, and hills. And if you become an expert in wind, heat, and hills, where you are able to train in all those elements, it makes the Ironman easier for you. And again, based on the Ironmans that we've talked about, I think Chattanooga is a good first one. I just really love the town of Chattanooga. I think Arizona is relatively beginner friendly due to the kind of the flat swim, the flatter bike course. Sometimes there's wind, sometimes there's not.
I've heard that the challenge on that one for a lot of people is the swim can be quite cold.
It is quite cold. I've done that one twice, and it's chilly. It's chilly.
And I did it when it was back in April. So it was different climate when I used to do it back in April. I never did it in the fall.
That's in what, November now?
It's in November. But Kamil, I can't recommend Cozumel highly enough. I thought Cozumel was one of the best. You've got a current swim with tropical fish, clear waters. You've got a great flat bike with a tailwind coming in off the coast. And you've got a few out and backs on the run that's relatively flat with the locals chasing you with margaritas. Can't be better.
So Jenn, what was your favorite one?
I think for recommendations, it depends on what you're comfortable with each discipline. So I think the swim is always a big question mark for a lot of people. To your point, Wendy, choosing a river swim is what a lot of people do because they feel more comfortable completing that type of swim. I personally love Ironman Florida, but I'm comfortable enough to swim in the ocean, which can be a huge variable for a lot of people. So I think it just depends what you're comfortable with on the swim, what race will play to your strengths as best it can. To your point, Wendy, any day it can be different with weather, temperature, but knowing what the course is going to give you, doing a little bit of research, I think it helps you make a decision for what you're most comfortable with and can train for. Like living in Florida, I would never choose Lake Placid until I could get somewhere.
It would be very different.
It'd be hard. It'd be very difficult. Even with a trainer, going to Haines City, Claremont.
You'd be spending a lot of time on the trainer on hill climbs. But I mean, it's a good point. You said, it can change day to day. I mean, Justin and I just both did Texas, and that's a great example, right? Justin, it looked like it was going to be wetsuit legal. And like the day before, it was 69 degrees or 71 degrees. Like it was wetsuit legal by over a degree. And no, I guess 75. But it was wetsuit legal by like almost 2 degrees. It was like 1.8 or something. And then the day of the race, it's not wetsuit legal by almost a degree. And like, I did think it was kind of funny because we were having this conversation that like Ironman almost always finds a way. If it's close, they like find a way. I've done a few where I'm like, there's no way that this is wetsuit legal. But that one, they're like, no, it's not. And I was racked right next to the guy that was making all the announcements. And he leaned over to us and he's like, this is not going to be wetsuit legal. And then he says, whatever you do, don't swallow the water.
Do it.
Don't do it. And I'm a coach. I work a lot with Triathlon, and I was at pool school in Chicago recently, and there's another coach there who was from Texas, had done the Ironman in Texas a few times, and he was telling us how sick he got on the bike from swallowing the water at Texas. And in fact, it got him in the hospital. I forget what it was. He had to be on like antibiotics or something. So all through that swim, that's what I had in the back of my head. I wish he had never told me that story, because all through the swim, I'm like, don't swallow the water, don't swallow the water, don't swallow the water. Now, how in the world do you swim 2.4 miles and not get water in your mouth? Like, you're going to swallow some of it. It's going to come in your nose, your ears, your mouth. Like, there's so many ways for it to get into your stomach, right?
It's all the other junk in the water you want to avoid too.
Yeah.
So I have a quick question, because we're talking about the swims. What if your swim's canceled? So I did Chattanooga in 2018, and this canceled that year due to bacteria, and I'm a swimmer, but I still wanted to experience a super fast downhill swim.
Yeah.
And then it was a time trial start. And me having done plenty of Ironmans, I still did it, and I still called myself an Ironman, but there's a lot of chat going on in social media is if the swim's canceled and you only do 138 miles instead of 140.2, do you still call yourself an Ironman?
I mean, my perspective is yes. And you see this all the time. It's not just Ironman. You see it in the running circles as well. Like we said, I do pretty much all the Run Disney events as well. And last year in 2024, the half marathon there got reduced to basically a quarter marathon, right? The half marathon got reduced to half of a half. And then for the back of the packers, it got reduced another 2 miles. And, you had all these like crazy people out in the parking lot doing laps so they could say they did all of the distance. Meanwhile, it was torrentially downpouring. And that one got shortened because of threat of hail, so a little different. But I think to me, the answer is the same. You did the course that the race director prescribed on that day. And I think like as long as you did the course that was prescribed to you, then you claim it. I don't know. Do you guys agree with that?
Totally agree. You can only race the course you're given on that day. Still an Ironman. Complete it.
Yeah, I agree.
And what do you think?
If I did that, I wowould feel like I have to go do it again.
That may be. You need like I'm doing Chattanooga this year because I'm like this year the 70.3 in 2 weeks because I'm like it's redemption, baby. Last year I did it. I was on like a PR bike and my chain snapped. So I sat there on the side of the road for 90 minutes waiting for the guy. Like I have every tool under the sun with me except for a chain breaker. I'm like, I need to take 2 links out of the chain. That's all. I'm like, please somebody give me a chain breaker, please. And, it's like, then I got back on the bike and finished it. But it's obviously becomes a very different race then. So like, now I get you, now it's a redemption race. But still like, on the day of, you have to deal with what is handed to you. And if that's like, this, because, the 70.3 recently is it Austin, I think? The other Texas one, the swim got canceled because the wind was so strong. And they had issues with wind on the bike, but I don't know that I have a lot of sympathy for wind on the bike. But same thing. All right. So you were talking about the swim. We all come from different swim backgrounds. About the bike, it sounds like Jenn, you said that you're a swimmer. It's your strong suit. What's your weakest link? Is it the bike, the runs?
I would say
sounds
the
like
bike.
not the swim.
No, the bike. I'm the opposite of what you described. I come out of the water, grab my bike, and there's still a lot of bikes. And then the rest of the bike, people are passing me. So the bike has definitely been the biggest challenge for me that I've had to work on.
Then for you, if the swim is canceled, like you feel disadvantaged.
Right. Completely.
Or like for me, I'm like, I just won a time trial this past weekend. I'm like, no swim, bring it on, man.
Right. You hope for it. Come on, no
I don't know about that. I do enjoy in kind of a sick and twisted way the swim, but yeah, I'm like, I'm not going to be upset if I go straight into a time trial. I mean, come on.
Right. Yeah. The bike, I've had to put the most time in to work to improve it for sure.
Okay. Justin, how about you? You know, between the bike, the run, the swim, what's your weak link?
I would probably say the bike.
Really?
Running is my strength. That's always
Okay.
been my strength. I was a marathoner and a 7.5 minute miler. You know, I love running.
I'm so jealous. If I saw sub 5 minutes for more than a mile, you're probably putting me on a stretcher.
I love running. It's just one of those things that at that point I'm wishing I'm back in after the strenuous bike, I'm wishing I'm back in the water all of a sudden, cooling down. So I mean, I think for me, for time purposes, I find I struggle a lot with the bike, making sure I get the timing right, as just Wendy pointed out, for nutrition, and making sure that I'm staying on target, especially with, conditions as they change, or they get windy or they get hot, drink before I get thirsty, eat before I get hungry, things like that. But for me, I know ahead of time, like the swim at the very beginning is going to be, for me, I'm going to enjoy that process. I enjoy the swim. I just think it's a kind of, if you're not doing like Escape from Alcatraz and it's absolutely freezing or something like that, or, sometimes Arizona, but I think most of the time the bike has those conditions that has the tendency to change a lot more frequently, and you're putting a lot of faith into your equipment too. And so it's one of those things that I always feel very, strong and very motivated, just like finishing strong, getting off the bike, and then getting onto the run, because then it's you. And
so you mentioned putting a lot of faith in your equipment.
Yeah.
And it reminded me, so I raced Nice last year.
Oh, congratulations.
And it was one of those, like, raced Lake Placid, qualified for Nice. Wendy, like you, is like, it's a very short turnaround. It's like 60 days. And coming out of Nice, like, it played to my strengths, right? Like, I'm from New England, I'm used to hills. I live in Southeast PA. If you think Southeast PA is flat, then you're nuts, because I can hardly go more than 10 miles without getting 1,500 feet elevation. Like, unless you're on like a rails to trails kind of thing, and even then you're getting some. But, there I saw all sorts of things I didn't expect, right? Like, you're talking like the top athletes in our sport, and the number of people who, like, they may be great as an athlete, but don't know about their equipment. I was talking to a lady recently who did Nice, and her front wheel fell off her bike on the downhill. And I'm like, how does that happen? Most of us today probably have through axles, and, hers was not a through axle, right? And so it obviously wasn't tight enough, and she hit a bump, and there goes the wheel. And I'm like, oh my God, if you've done that course, your equipment needs to be pretty solid, because if you're ripping down those downhills at 40, 50 miles an hour, you're going over a cliff if something fails, right? Or like in Lake Placid, you're going down Keen Descent at 50 to 60 miles an hour if you are bold enough. And, you have a mechanical failure, you're in the hospital, if not dead, right? And other courses are the same way. So, like, you are putting a lot of faith in your equipment, but also your own mechanical skills. So I think, like, for me, one of the things I've noticed over the last year or two, like, as I've paid more attention to other athletes and gotten out of my own, like crush this space, is, we need to be better mechanics. Like, we need to know our equipment more than we do. It's like, if you talk to a swimmer, they know what wetsuit they're wearing and how it works. They know what goggles they're wearing and why and how it works, et cetera, right? Same thing with a runner, right? We all run. Everyone on this call, we all run. How many pairs of running shoes do you have?
Are we admitting this publicly?
All right. So does anybody have fewer than 5 pairs of running shoes in their current rotation?
Definitely
Okay,
me.
so you haven't done enough running.
I change shoes every single run I do, though. I mean, that's one of those things. I'm like
Oh,
constantly.
but you got your trainers, right?
Hmm.
And you have at least one, probably 2 of those. They're your workhorse, right? And then you've probably got another pair of shoes that maybe are carbon plated or Pebax plated or some fancy new technology that's not a super shoe, but responsive for your speed work. And you probably have a race day pair that is a super shoe, right? So we all.
I've got, I think, at any given time, I think about 15 pairs of running shoes that I'm constantly using for different
All
things.
right, you got me beat, man.
Yeah, I'm admitting it on this call. Sorry, everyone.
So to our 10,000 listeners, you heard it right here. Justin has more than 15 pairs of running shoes.
But I mean, but there's so much to consider: distance, time. What training methods? What's the terrain? Is it ruddy? Is it muddy? Is it
weather and what mood you're in that morning? What phase of the moon?
Okay, I'm
and
so
the
old
weight.
Yeah, I'm old school. I'm not a gear person because I started so long ago when gear wasn't readily available. I had a road bike for 16 years before I got my first triathlon bike. I did my first couple Ironmans in Kona on a road bike with like clip-on aero bars, and I did just fine.
Yeah.
I did great. My body adapted to road style geometry. So when I got my first tri bike in 2009, I'd been racing for 16 years. I struggled on the triathlon geometry. I didn't like it. I still preferred road riding. I do primarily most of my training on a road bike. I'll jump on the tri bike about 8 weeks leading up to a race. But yeah, I mean, I owned 1 pair of shoes. I had 1 bike, didn't have power meter, didn't have anything.
Yeah.
But that's because that's how I was grown up to be. I think this day and age, I think equipment is so key and it really does enhance your performance. It really is a bigger investment.
Yeah. And it's so interesting. You mentioned, road bike versus tri bike, especially for newer athletes. I think people feel pressured to buy a tri bike.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, no, you can do these on a road bike. You don't need clip-on aero bars. They give you an advantage, but you can get it done on a mountain bike if you were really ambitious.
When I did, quick story, because a lot of you did Lake Placid. The first year I did Lake Placid was 2002, and there was a guy with the banana seat.
I've heard about
and these bars, really high bars on a banana seat, wearing jean cutoffs and probably Keds. And he finished in relatively probably 13 or 14 hours, but that's how he did Lake Placid.
I mean, 13 hours is not that bad.
Yeah, on that bike.
Yeah, and that course too. A lot of people, struggle on that bike. And the run course, I mean, they changed it this year. It's a little bit harder than it was. It doesn't have the long out and back on River Run anymore. It's a shorter out and back. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot more elevation than there had been because there's now another out and back that's climbing up a hill. Mm-hmm. It's like you look at it and you're like, oh, it's flat. No, it's plus 3 degrees. But yeah, I know some of my newer athletes, they have I don't know what I call it, not bike envy, but anxiety. It's I only have a road bike. I'm like, that's fine. That's fine. Do you have flat pedals or clip-ins? Flats. Okay, maybe we invest in some clip-ins. Why? Because especially if you're doing hills, it does help. Although I don't know, did you guys see the thing on GCN? So equipment is such a fascinating topic because we all have our own experiences and our own preferences. And they did a thing, like flat pedals versus clip-ins, and found that there was no material difference between the two. And I'm like, yeah, but for me, if I'm going up a hill, I pull more than probably as much as I push going up a hill. Mm-hmm. But if it's flat, I could see that. I'm like, are you really pulling up on a flat? I don't know. I don't feel like I am, but on a hill for sure. So I thought that was fascinating. But again, it's if you only ride on with flats, then you know how to operate it, you would imagine. So as we were talking about swimming, Kamil, you reminded me of this. So am I the only one who's gotten out of a Ironman swim with black eyes?
I got punched once. and it was in a Turkey 70.3. I did a race there, and I got punched, and the goggle just sucked my eye, and I had a pretty good black eye for many days afterwards.
Jason, you are nodding your head. So you have a story there. I can see it.
I mean, it's one of those things. One of the things I love about the sport is simply, you're learning through it. So if I do something wrong, if my first Ironman, or as I see it wrong because I didn't know, it's one of those things for anyone listening that, fit on a goggle actually makes a difference for me. And really it has. And so I remember doing the first couple, like, doing these distances and, in some of the waters, and whether you're getting bonked or pushed or anything like that, I'm coming out pulling these things off my eyes that were very ill fitting. And, there's pictures of me that I'm like,
suction cups, man.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's one of those things that it took me time to, like, all right, I got to try this out. I got to try this and see what's a good fit. And then, then comfort, I think, if I can point this out, comfort is such a big part of the race. And I think that kind of goes across the three disciplines, comfort in the aero position, comfort in your shoes, and so having comfort in goggles and, coming out of the water, without black eyes I think is hugely important.
Yeah. I ended up, I train in different goggles than I race in. I'm like, comfort is the thing. Like training, I got those Form goggles like a year ago because I'm like, oh, I don't need my watch in the water anymore. I don't need a wet piece of paper stuck to the pool deck anymore. It's all like in my goggles. But man, it takes me like 3 days for those goggle marks to go away. And by the time they go away, it's time to put them back on again. But like in the race, like I discovered, is it like Snake and Pig, I think is the name of the brand. They're like the most comfortable goggles out there. I swear to God. They have like this like air-filled gasket that goes around it. And I'm like, I'm not so fast that like a little angular design is going to make me materially faster. So I'm like, you get out and like your eyeballs are still where they're supposed to be. But no, I did this, it wasn't a Ironman branded race. It was a 70.3 from this, there's a company in the Northeast that does these, sprints, Olympics, couple 70.3s, kinetic. And, it was down in like the Baltimore area. It was a cold swim. And, it was in like the harbor area. It was a very cold swim. I got out of the water. I was like a bit blue, but the 3 started in a different spot. They had at the same time an Olympic running. And so we went off. It was like 3 laps of this like dock area. And, I was going into like lap 2 and the gun goes off for the Olympics. And so you have like the pointy end of the Olympic kids, which are all guys, going out in the water at the same time that the 70.3 folks are like a quarter of the way through their second lap. And these guys just swam over us. I not only got out of the water blue, but with 2 black eyes. The guys, more than the women, the guys will swim over you, through you, under you, around you, get out of their way because they are not going to stop or move for you. Certainly not at the pointy end, right? So that was a lesson. Kamil, you talked about lessons in the water. That was a lesson in the water for me, is like in a race like that, like get out of their way.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it wasn't just that people were bumping into me. I was bumping into people too, just because
it's a contact sport. They don't tell you that.
Swimming skill, I guess. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, Ironman swims, they're a full contact sport.
Yeah. I guess you can take the, route all the way out, but...
Yeah, you can, but, then if you're not doing a great job of sighting, then you're off in La La Land.
Yeah, true.
So one of the things that you see a lot about, in the Facebook forums, Reddit, wherever you peruse your information, and you hear about it on a lot of podcasts, is bike fitting. So Wendy, you made a point earlier that, you were doing this before all these different types of equipment were sexy or even invented. Have you had a bike fit?
Yeah. So again, when I started triathlon, I started with the sprints. I was a collegiate swimmer and I did the swim. My very first triathlon, I did the swim portion. I watched the biker, I watched the runner, and then I did the whole sprint the next year and I was hooked. And I did it on I did my first one on a mountain bike. And then I had a lot of road racing friends from Ann Arbor, Michigan, who said, you need a road bike. And the best advice I got was don't buy the first road bike you ride, because I wanted to, because I was coming from a mountain bike background. So I didn't purchase the first road bike. I did try to shop around, and I did get a Fit back then. It was just a basic Fit, but professional fits really started when I was getting a tri bike. I had, maybe 4 different road bikes within that 16-year period. Oh, actually, I got a custom bike. That was actually huge. That was a total fit. But when I got a tri bike, I struggled with bike fits.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had multiple fits. I've had multiple tri bikes, and the one that I got worked for me. That was a Trek Speed Concept. And I had that one for 3 or 4 years. And then I ended up selling that one during COVID because people wanted bikes. And I'm like, okay, I'm ready to get rid of this bike. And I got another bike. But bike fit, I tell people, is the most important investment in the sport. If you can't, besides coaching, is the most important investment if you can handle it. But I think bike fit is so key, because if you're not comfortable on your bike, that makes for a long day. Even if you just do sprints or Olympics, it's just, you're going to be uncomfortable on the run. You're going to just have a bad day if you're not comfortable on your bike.
I heard a statistic recently that of all triathletes, that less than 2% hire a coach.
Oh, that is so low.
And the inverse is also true, that of triathletes who podium, almost 100% of them have a coach.
Mm-hmm.
As not a surprise. Kamil, you saw my reaction earlier to ChatGPT for training plans, because a lot of people are using them. And I was talking to someone in Texas. I was one of the coaches in the Tri tent for a while. And he had a ChatGPT plan, and I was like, okay, good luck.
The benefit of a coach is not, in just getting the information, but also it helps you comply with the information. So I definitely see that hiring a coach is much better than getting information.
Yeah, I mean, coaching is, I think there's a couple of coaches on this call, right? Coaching is so unique because it's individual, right? And if your coach is a good fit for you, I've had athletes who when they hired a coach, they really wanted an accountability buddy. And it's I'm not an accountability buddy, but some coaches might be, right? And others like me are going to be okay, well, I want to see the data and how you're doing, and I want to see your plan adjust based on how you're doing and have the conversations, right? And if you're struggling on the run, ChatGPT and these canned plans, which are fine if you're just wanting to get across the finish line, they may not understand that you've got a niggle, happening in your calf or your quad or your hamstring, where I'm going to be okay, let's go take care of that. Go talk to a PT or an ortho, before we go too much further, because that niggle could rapidly turn into a tear or worse, right? Or Wendy, you said you went from 12 miles a week to 40, right? It's what's the first thing that goes through our head is now you're at risk of, muscle and, skeletal problems, right? It's that's when stress fractures happen. That's when tears and strains and pulls happen. And, we were joking earlier, are you really an athlete if you don't have a PT or an ortho on speed dial? But that's wise, because we've all done that, right? I inadvertently ended up running 3 marathons on a partially broken bone. I had no idea. And it's wise, because, I got bad advice and we thought it was an IT band issue. And it turned out, nope, it was a fracture. And it was exactly the same thing, is because, my load didn't increase, but my pace did. I went from a 12-minute runner to a 6.5-minute runner in 4 months' time. Because, which had I had a good coach at the time, he would have called out and been probably getting too fast, too quick, right? That's when those kinds of things happen. So Wendy, back to the bike fit. I always recommend to my athletes when they get a bike, get a bike fit. I've heard a lot of different guidance, people should get them every year, anytime that you have significant changes in body weight or musculature, right? If you get a lot stronger, or if the opposite happens, that you should invest in one. Now, they're not cheap. right? At least a good one. Around here, you could easily spend $300 to $600 on a quality bike fit. For you, like what benefit did you see from it? Because you've been doing this for a while. You've had several bikes.
Yeah, I mean, so just comfort, wanting to ride my bike because it was comfortable. I never really had any crotch issues like a lot of people will have. My saddles have never given me issues, but it was more like upper body. I have a leg length discrepancy, so a lot of my so called running injuries where I'd get injured while running were attributed to an improper cleat fit or an improper bike fit. And so because I was so imbalanced on the bike and I was putting in all those miles on the bike in an uncomfortable position, that would carry over to when I would run, I would get posterior tibialis tendonitis, IT band syndrome. And the list goes on of how many injuries I had in those early days of training. So comfort, again, especially my upper body, my neck, my back, my lower back is so important. And then, I've been in the sport, I'm going on year 33. I'm older, my body's changed. I'm not as comfortable as I was 10 years ago. So I have to dial in my bike fit if I plan on doing these half Ironmans, because, my last Ironman was in 2022, and I'm doing more like ultra running. But in that 2022 Ironman, I've had this severe lower back pain. And again, that's just due to age. I probably have a little arthritis. I could probably afford to just dial it in a little bit, maybe give up a little bit more aerodynamic for comfort.
Yeah. And, in a sprint, you can get away with a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're doing 100 plus miles on a bike, that's a long time in the saddle. And, most of these courses we've talked about, there's not a lot of relief from being in the saddle.
Right.
Lake Placid, okay, maybe you're out of the saddle a few times. But the rest of these are all we've talked about, mostly flat courses. And the advantage is they're flat. The disadvantage is you are in the saddle the whole time and you are pedaling for 112 miles nonstop. So, Jenn, how about you? Have you had a bike fit?
Yes, definitely multiple times, because as you said, things change, or even just it being multiple years between bike fits. And again, comfort is the biggest piece of having that bike fit. I also think it's important. I don't think some people realize when they go to get a bike that they also are sized. Like knowing your size, knowing which brands might fit better to your geometry, your specific build is also a big thing. So purchasing the right size bike also plays a big part, because there's only so much you can do in a bike fit to adjust for some of that. So you want to make sure you have the right bike for you.
I can't possibly be the only one who bought the bike that the bike shop told me was the right size as my first bike, and then later learned that it was the wrong size.
I'm sure that happens a lot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, my first road bike, I love it to death. It was, one of the ones that was like, I was speed skating a lot at the time. It was, I bought it in 2001. It was one of my first big post-college purchases, with what felt to me like, adult money that I now know is more like, pre-adult money. And, that bike was too big for me. I still love it. It's so pretty. I let my son use it. It's now 25 years old. And he's like, Mom, this thing's an antique. But, now on a proper sized bike, it's like, oh, this is what it's supposed to feel like. How about you, Justin?
Time for a new bike. Time for a new bike fit.
That's what you got from this call. I mean, every day is a good day for a new bike. Let's be honest, right? That is what I have learned over the last 5 years on Facebook. Every day is a good day for a new bike.
I definitely agree. I have had multiple bike fits. I've had a couple of bikes now, and it's like everyone said. Definitely, your body chemistry changes, and as you get more involved in the sport, your needs of the bike change too. And of course, as you become, I think, more competitive, at least in my case for myself, I'm wanting to, find ways to compete against myself, which is nice. So I think that definitely helps.
I assume none of us are getting paid to show up at these races. So the only person to compete against is ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I'm certainly not getting paid to cross that finish line. I'm paying a lot of money to cross that finish line. But, you know, I mean, I got the whole math going on the bike. It's like the bike was expensive, but the more of these I do, the cheaper the bike gets, right?
I like
The
that.
cheaper
That's
each
the
race.
idea.
So just go sign up for all the ones that you can, because the more you do, the cheaper it gets.
Yeah.
I don't think it works that way, but I mean, it sounds good. So, you know, Kamil, how about you? Bike, what do you
Speaking
ride?
of bike fits, I did the Oceanside in April, right? In January, that's when I bought my tri bike off of Facebook Marketplace. It's pretty nice. It's a Cervelo P3, I think, P series, Cervelo P series. But the person I was buying it from was telling me it's a good size for me. But it was a 58, size 58. And for my height, I should have size 54. And when I took the bike, so right from him, I went to the cycling store. And they right away said, "How tall are you?" And I'm saying 5'9". They're like, "That bike is way too big for you." And I was telling them, "Look, I tried riding it. It seems fine because I've never had a nice bike. You know, it seems like I can ride it." And so I told them to just kind of try as hard as they can, you know, like put the seat down,
make it work,
the aero bars back, make it work for me. And they said, "This is going to be bad. You need a new bike." But I made it work. For the 3 hours in Oceanside, I was comfortable, but I cannot imagine sitting on it for more. So I'm hoping, like you guys are saying, that bike fits could make it more comfortable, that if I get a bike fit or might have to downsize the bike for the full Ironman, I'm hoping it's going to get more comfortable and maybe get more power out of it.
Well, you know, you can go to a bike fitter before you buy a bike, so you know what size to get.
And how do I find a bike fitter?
Google
bike fitter. Okay.
There's a lot of them. Yeah. I know around here there's 2 or 3 that are pretty well known. But yeah, most bike shops do an okay job of getting it in the right size.
Okay. And so then you get geometry that you need, and then you go buy a bike. And you know how to set up your aero bars.
Yeah. Yeah, you set up an appointment and like, "Hey, I'm looking to buy a new bike. You know, help me figure out what the right size is for me." They'll want some information, right? Like what brand, what model are you looking at? Or they can make recommendations on bikes based on what they see.
See, when I bought the bike, I saw, 54 to 58, I think that's centimeters, and it's not that much. So in my head, it didn't seem like a big deal.
I don't know. For me, I'm in a 52 and I'm 5'10", 5'9.5". And like my road bike is a 52. My speed concept is a medium, which is like a 52 to 54. And my son is like 6'1". He's in a same Madone road bike. He's in a I think 56. But like in this sport, like millimeters matter. I had a horrible time getting a seat that I didn't hate. And for me, like I did end up getting like the bi-saddle, the adjustable one, but that was after getting like a bike seat specific fitting. And to find out that what I already knew, I have narrow hips, which means I have narrow sit bones. And, getting one that actually was narrow enough was a challenge. And then we got it on the bike, and like on the road bike, it's fine. Like I can ride like anything on the road bike. When you're down in like the aero position, like everything changes. And so my seat is actually tilted at like -5 degrees or 4 degrees, something like that. And like 1 millimeter front to back made like a massive difference. It was like the 1 millimeter made the difference between I hate this seat and this bike and this sport, and oh my God, this is awesome, right? Like 1 millimeter. Of course, the other big thing, I was super skeptical because I'm like, there's flavor of the day stuff too in this sport, right? Like every sport has flavor of the day. And right now, like what crank arm length are we all running? It's like, if you've had a bike fit recently, we're all on 165s, right? Because that's what the pros are all running. They're all running like the short cranks. But, the ones I put the 165s on and it made a difference, right? I can spin faster. But when I showed up, they're like, "Why do you have road bike cranks on your speed concept?" I'm like, "I don't know. The track sent me." It's the same thing. So it's an expensive mistake. SRAM Red is not cheap, right? And their cranks are not cheap. But yeah, that's what it came with. All right. So I have one question for everyone. So we've talked on a lot of topics today. I hope this is like really informative to the people that have, that are listening. I've certainly learned a lot, right? We all have our own experiences, but it's always fascinating, hearing, other people and like what you've experienced and like how it's different, how it's the same. One of the things we kind of talked about a little bit, but not a lot, is like nutrition, right? Like Wendy, you were talking about goo and how like when you started the sport, there really wasn't a lot of, advice on, nutrition. And it is a relatively new sport, compared to like road running. And even there, like, I'm a certified, run coach, and like even that, like the advice on, how to fuel for a run has changed over the last 10 years. Right. And, Justin, you were talking about like water and learning how to drink, before you got thirsty, right? Where like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, the advice was like, drink when you're thirsty, drink to thirst. And like what we know now today is like, if you drink to thirst, then you might be going to the hospital at the end, right? So how do you all approach nutrition? Because, Wendy, I think you said 100 grams an hour, which like when you said that, the thing that flipped through my mind is like, wow, like the advice we give, men today is 70 to 90 and women is like 50 to 70.
Right. So what happened to me was, again, I didn't know. That's the only thing I was focused on, is making sure I was eating and drinking. And I got lucky. I didn't have any GI distress due to that volume of carbohydrate. And I think I was hypoatremic after my first Ironman, before hypoatremia really was known, because I was really, really puffy. I peed 6 times on the bike that year. I peed like every 2 miles of the run. And I
Wow.
would just douse myself with sponges, but it was just water going through me. And I was really, really puffy at the end of that race, because I think I overhydrated with water and not enough electrolyte back then. So fast forward 10 years later, in 2007, I got invited to go to the Gatorade Sports Science Institute and have my sweat rate tested. And what that involved was a 2-hour heat, Kona heat acclimated, 85 degrees, certain percent humidity on the bike at your race pace effort, and then a 2-hour treadmill run in that climate at your race pace effort. And they measured how much you ate and drank and the day before, and collected urine samples and all that. And my body weight didn't changed maybe by a half pound, which showed me I was hydrating enough. But they totally told me, they're the ones that said, you were eating way too much carbohydrate. So they dialed down my carbohydrate intake to 50 grams an hour. And so that was about 1 gel and maybe a bottle of Gatorade per hour, or a half a bottle of Gatorade per hour, depending on how many calories was in it. And the next year, in 2008, I had the race of my life. And so that told me how valuable dialing in your own personal hydration needs, your electrolyte needs, which again, back then, they told me I get enough electrolyte from Gatorade that I didn't need to take any extra sodium pills or anything like that. So that's when I really started learning about fueling and how important and how valuable it is to practice and training and get it dialed into your own personal sweat loss needs.
I think that's fascinating, especially about the electrolytes, because I think, marketing today scares a lot of people into thinking that they need to be taking all this supplemental electrolytes, when depending on what your nutrition plan is, you might actually be already getting what you need.
Right.
Right. Jenn, how about you? What do you do?
I have been the definition of what not to do, with 2 trips to the ER after races. Yes. One was not my first Ironman, my second time at Chattanooga. I was in the med tent for quite a while, and then later in the ER. It's just one of those things, nutrition is the 4th leg of the race. I think I put my salt in my handheld and just forgot about it, and for part of the run, and it went from there. So really figuring out for that case, I was low on potassium, magnesium. So all the things I was low, not enough.
So, and then let me pause you for a second. Yeah. So has anybody else experienced low potassium on a run or a race?
What does it feel like?
Hell.
Is craving a banana, is that the same thing?
No. Well, I mean, that's your body telling you need more, but like a lot of people mistake cramps for needing sodium when like usually it's not sodium. Usually it's an electrolyte of some sort, and often it's potassium. Like, so Jenn, I had probably not to the same degree, but I had an experience similar with potassium where I actually learned on a marathon that I am low potassium and, didn't end up going to the hospital, but I'm sitting there at like mile 20 and both legs, my shins and calves were both cramped. Like it was like my foot was fighting on what if it wanted to pull down or up. That was the worst marathon experience of my life.
Yeah,
it sounds like
it's very similar in that I finished the race. Crossed the finish line, thought I was okay. Took a bite of pizza. That didn't go so well. And the cramping started. My hands literally, hands and feet, I couldn't move them. They put me in a wheelchair and I'm just cramped in a position that I couldn't move. So yeah, cramps are definitely a huge sign of the potassium piece. Once I got to the ER, I was also very shaky, which was a sign of just those low levels. So I will say I've done the sweat test, trying to figure things out. Living in Florida, you can't afford to not know how to do your nutrition in the heat and humidity. And I actually started working with a nutritionist who is in the sport to help me really dial in, because I did Kona. And I knew with the heat that if I didn't dial things in, it was probably not going to end well for me, just given past history. So I can't advocate enough that figuring out ahead of time what's going to work for you is really critical.
So Kamil, what do you do for nutrition?
So like I mentioned before, I tend to over prepare and overthink things. So I during my training days, right, on the long ones on Saturday, Sunday, I would try fueling as much as possible. And especially on the bike, it kind of makes time pass by a little bit faster. So I snack on the bike a lot. It was mostly solid foods when I was training. And then I transitioned into gels. And you're probably going to hate me for this, but I asked ChatGPT
Hate is such a strong word.
ChatGPT how to make my own nutrition gel, sports gel, and my hydration mix too. And then I made both. And I was just eating them. I could make a bigger package. Put it in my bike, and I would basically fuel as much as I wanted or could handle. And since I have bodybuilding background, it's easy for me to eat a lot of food. And so it's more than I have to limit myself rather than push myself to eat more. So I was able to take in, I think, like 100 grams of carbs per hour during the race. And I think that's why I felt amazing all the way through to the end.
Yeah, for most men, like 90 is kind of on the high side, but not outrageous.
I did notice Wendy mentioned the puffiness. I did, because I carb up for the race maybe a little too much, and I drink a lot of water and electrolyte drinks, and I was very puffy, and I wonder
if you're puffy, like it's obviously a sign that something's not working the way it should be. For a lot of people, it's a sign that they're not drinking enough. It's like water retention is a sign that you're dehydrated, ironically, but it can go the other way too, right? If you're taking a lot of electrolytes, it can also be a sign that you are taking too much. And
then there's added body weight with the carb up, right? And taking in a lot of water before. And I wonder what's the balance between gaining too much weight before the race and then being lighter and more efficient.
Yeah, I see a lot of advice online about that, especially in the running communities. And like the contemporary advice that I've been hearing a lot about, and Jenn, maybe you've heard differently, is basically anything you do more than 24 hours out from the race, nutritionally, is of limited benefit. Whether it's like, hydrating, because, a lot of people will start like increasing their volume of hydration a couple of days or a week before the race, which like you can do to a point, but it may have limited benefit. But like carb loading more than a day or two at most out is really not giving you a huge benefit, although pizza certainly tastes good. So Jenn, I don't know, does that kind of jive with like this what you've been kind of hearing?
Yes. Same. Just
Yeah.
making sure all the levels are kind of topped off, but not to go to any extreme.
Right. Yeah. I was in one forum, it was a running forum where this coach, this woman, who's a coach, was, sharing her nutrition plan, kind of 2 weeks out from the race. And she was telling people, she's like, you should start like increasing your hydration now, start increasing. And then like, the amount of carbs she was adding so far out was really significant. And I remember, like, I had posted, I'm like, please don't do this. This is kind of a dangerous plan. And to her credit, she was very kind of open after the race. She ended up in the hospital because like that was a bad plan. And, it's like, you kind of have to be careful with like the overindulgent. It's like, carb up. Yes. But doing it for a month in advance is probably just going to add more around your waist. So, Justin, I don't think you shared what your nutrition plan was, but we kind of chatted a little bit about it before we started recording. So, like how's that going for you?
Well, I have my plan while on the bike. That's really my main source of nutrition at any given time. I was very fortunate in my first Ironman that I ran across the prior voice of the Ironman, Mike Riley, and he gave me some on my first Ironman, not really knowing what I was doing, gave me some really great tips. And to these days, I still keep them to heart, including getting up at 3 a.m. The day of the Ironman to have a half a sandwich. I still do that. And then I'll eat a granola bar on the way from transition to swim, or something like that. So I'm feeling not overly bloated, but fueled going into the swim and feeling good. And then the moment I'm out of the swim, that's the first thing I do as soon as I get on the bike is start. I swear by them, my Uncrustable sandwiches. I love them.
I was hoping you were going to say that. I love Uncrustables. I will not, if you've heard the podcast before, I kind of make fun a little bit about people who bring sandwiches on the bike. I'm like, at some point, it's more of a puree than a sandwich, but I'm like, Uncrustables in the morning, like there's nothing more satisfying than a partially frozen Uncrustable.
That's it. So then, I'm having my goos. I have my 2 bottles behind me that are always carrying nutrition with me. So I'm starting off with branched chain amino acids and then an electrolyte bottle. And then, goos and salts. And yeah, I'm one of those guys that also takes Advil. And, but one thing that I did learn,
you're careful with that, right?
Oh yeah. No, that's in the morning. That's like,
okay.
Done, one and done.
Yeah. I heard it probably made a metric last year that like the leading cause of liver issues in triathletes is overindulgent and anti-inflammatories, NSAIDs.
Well, and on that note, so for me, running, it's really hard for me to consume. I mean, I drink and I take fluids, but eating solids while running is just a hard thing for me to do. And I've always been like that. It doesn't matter if it's a 5K, a marathon, doesn't matter what it is. So, I have to feel fueled going into that, into the run. So I can do gels. Gels are fine while I'm running, but that's something. So one thing though that I did learn, and for me, for any sort of GI distress, special needs bag, I'm just going to throw it out there, Tums and Pepto-Bismol. I've had that situation where I'm like calling out my name, grabbing a Tums. I'm like, if I'm having some GI distress, done. So that's something I'm definitely going to pitch. But
yeah. It's during the race?
During the race.
Yeah. Yeah, so you haven't done a full yet. So in the full distance, you have 5 bags that they give you, right? In the half distance, they have 3, right? You got your morning clothes bag, which you should put in like anything that you want immediately after the race. But then you got, your bike, T1 bag, your T2 bag. But you have 2 special needs bags. Are they special needs or personal needs? They changed the name recently. I don't remember which way it went. Just like wetsuit strippers are now peelers. It's like we're bananas. Instead of taking our wetsuits off, you're peeling them off, I guess. But in those, you can put whatever you want. The only restriction is you're not getting it back, right? Some races you do, but like the vast majority, and you'll get that usually about halfway through the bike and halfway through the run. Some courses you can access the bag on the run multiple times. Some even though you run past it multiple times, you can only access it once. So like Texas, you run past it 3 times, but you're only allowed to get into it once. Lake Placid, you run past it 4 times and you can get into it 4 times. So like every course is different. Nice was the same way, you run past it like on that one like 8 times and you could potentially get into it 8 times. And talk about a boring run course. It's like flat. I think I had like 1 foot of rise and it's like out, back, 4 times each way. Very boring. The bike was phenomenal, but the run, not so much. So like what I learned, one of the things that I learned after my first is, so I wear contacts, and one of the problems with the contacts, at least for me, like they're the daily ones, and the ones I wear are specifically made for sports. So they're supposed to be like more hydrating or whatever. It sounds really sexy, but they get foggy. Like, they get dry and they get foggy. And like on the bike, especially, well, the run, especially, like the sweat and the salt getting in your eyes can like really fog them up. So since they're dailies, right? It's like, okay, I'll wear my regular glasses a couple extra days. I throw into each of those 4 bags a set of contacts. So if I lose one on the swim, I know after the swim, I've got another set waiting for me in T1. And same thing on the bike. My personal needs bag has a set. My run bag in T2 has a set. And my personal needs bag has a set. I also put in mine, the little travel size things of sunscreen, which did not come in handy too much at Texas. I got very sunburnt on the bike. And then I also put in, the little disposable things of chamois cream. I put 1 in each one of those bags because like there are so many places you can chafe and it is such a useful thing. And I don't bother with like Body Glide. I'm like, chamois cream is better than Body Glide. Like, on the run, just use chamois cream. It's easy. You buy it on Amazon for like nothing, for like 50 of those little disposable things, and it's cheap. You don't use it, too bad. It's like 50 cents, gone.
The planning of those bags can be quite stressful. So the more you can think about it before you get to the race and kind of know these bags exist and plan for them, the better. Because I do remember my first Ironman being like overwhelmed and really overthinking every single thing.
So at Texas, and I talk about Texas, like the most recent one, I was one of the like ask a coach, people for the first timer Q&A. And by far the most common question that I got in that Q&A was, what do I put in my personal needs bag? And I'm like, it's up to you, man. What do you think you need? But here's what I do. It's like a lot of people, especially if you're not using on-course nutrition, like nutrition, water bottles, contacts, women put, pads or tampons, in there. It's like, you put what you need in there. It's yours. The only thing to remember is like, you're not getting it back. So
you guys mentioned the peanut butter jelly sandwiches. What's a good mix of solid food and gels for the race? Because I'm thinking the full Ironman, it would be really hard to just eat gels for.
This is such a great question, Kamil. How many of us have on the run, had like a fabulous bike and then got on the run and just wanted to puke at some point? So Jenn's, is that, yeah. Wendy, you?
I've never really felt that bad on the run, but I did want to, I just thought of one of my Ironmans. It was called 5430 Sports in Boulder in 2002 or 2003. I trained with jelly beans instead of gels for jelly beans. And by the time I got to the race, I had a fanny pack full of jelly beans for the run, and I got it and I tossed it right away because I'm like, I cannot eat another jelly bean. And so then where was I left to do? I had no fuel. So I relied on the generic stuff that they had at the aid stations. Again, it worked out well for me, but I advise people to always have a plan A, plan B, plan C. And if you know, like I knew early on after I went to the Gatorade Sports Science Institute after 2008, Gatorade was my fuel of choice. It's on the course. I am not going to train with it because I know it works. So I started experimenting and training with other hydration products, other energy products. Eventually down the line, I ended up eating more like real food, like cookies instead of bars, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches in my special needs bag. And I started going more on the whole food nutrition rather than the energy product. I haven't had a gel in years. So it's just good to experiment with first what's on the course to see if you can rely with what's on the course. And then next, what if that doesn't work for you? What are you going to do?
I think that's great advice. I learned last year, one of the pros, I forget the guy's name, is I think he won Lake Placid last year. He used his gummy bears on the bike. Now in my head, I'm like, how do you carry that many gummy bears? But I mean, it works for him. So you got to do it. What works for you. I know for me personally, like I rely really heavily on Martin gels. Why Martin? Because that's what's on course. But in my training, I don't use Martin that much. I use Precision a lot. And outside the US, a lot of times it's Martin for gels and Precision for the electrolytes, which I personally like better than this Mortal hydration stuff. A lot of people that I've talked to, including myself, get headaches with the Mortal hydration. I guess it has some like artificial sweeteners in there. I was very disappointed when they switched from Gatorade to Mortal. But
me too.
Yeah.
Just
Plus, there's like
throwing
no
that out
calories.
there.
There's like no calories in it, so you really have to think. If you're going to rely on that, you have to think really separately about like hydration versus electrolytes versus carbs. And that was when I started experimenting with like high carb liquid nutrition, like Scratch and stuff like that. But so Justin, you had a really great reaction to that. There's something behind there.
The Mortal, I'm sorry, that was just not a switch I was happy. I feel, got to have little things. I feel strongly about that. But, to kind of get back to,
I don't think you're alone in that.
Yeah, to get back to Kamil about, things to eat and things like that. I also enjoy, granola bars. And I'll tell you, as Jill pointed out, you can have a great bike ride. I can tell you, I did New Zealand a year or two ago and had a great bike ride. I was coming in and I got stung by a massive New Zealand wasp right in the leg, right there. And it swelled and it blew up, and I ended up in the medical tent for a few minutes, and it was like, this golf ball growing out of my leg, and they iced it and then I was like, you know what? This is going to suck. But, you kind of get back out there, and then exactly had that moment. It was a great bike. And then from that and from whatever else I was going through, I completely vomited. And then I was like, okay, this is going to be one of those days. And so, got back on target with nutrition, had to walk for a minute or two. And then finally, the pain subsided and then took off. But it's one of those things, there are days that you have it, and I think that's no exception. And so, having exactly as Wendy pointed out, plan A, plan B, plan C, having that, it's always, it's golden.
Yeah, I discovered, the little applesauce pouches that they have for like the kids. Some of the courses, not all, some of them have them on the food tables. And I always like passed by it because I'm like, that's going to be gross, sitting out in the sun all day. Then in Nice, coming off the bike, like I apparently was way overloaded on electrolytes. So I was like very green. And I didn't know at the time that that's like actually a classic sign of having too many electrolytes is having that like pukish feeling. But there was nothing to come up because it's all like gels, right? Which metabolize pretty quickly. And about halfway through the run, I grabbed one of those applesauce things. It was like last ditch effort to like not kill myself and just squeezed that thing, emptied it, went right down. Within like 30 seconds, my belly was settled. So like sometimes getting that solid in you makes such a huge difference, especially if you're like generally on like a liquid or gel plan. Like I think one of the things like for endurance racing in general is like, like you said with the bee sting, heat, Jenn, you were talking about, your nutrition plan gone awry is like you kind of got to roll with the punches and deal with what you've got in front of you. And, you're kind of like diagnosing on the fly, like, why do I feel this way? One of the things I tell my athletes is I'm like, you should always be like taking those moments to like do the self-assessment. Like, how do I feel? Why do I feel this way? Can I do more? Do I need to do less? Do I need to change something? And if like you just have a plan and you stick with it and don't deviate, then you're going to fail. At least that's my opinion. I don't know if you guys agree with that. I see head nods. But the people who are listening can't hear the head nods.
There has to be a balance though between just, reevaluating and than maybe freaking out and making wrong decisions suddenly.
Well,
So
yeah, and
sometimes it's
part
good
of
to
that's
follow a plan too.
experience too, right? Is like, we've all experienced where we had that freak out moment, and at least I assume we've all had that. I have, where we've had that freak out moment and made the wrong decision. And then, like, I think experience is recognizing when you've made the wrong decision and adjusting so that it's the right decision or
Well,
a less wrong decision.
Well, there's
And
such a sense
learn
of
from those wrong
spontaneity.
decisions.
Yeah, that's right. Learn from it. And so that next time you're in a similar situation, you can be like, hey, I did this other thing and it worked out badly. Let's try something else.
Well, and there's such a sense of spontaneity. I bet Wendy, probably more than all of us, can probably attest to this. That no race is ever going to be the same, and that you're constantly going to be surprised by something, whether it's a turned over concrete truck in the middle of the road, or the weather conditions, or how you're feeling that day, or meeting some incredible people along the way, learning some absolutely inspirational stories that you keep with you for the rest of your life. It's truly an endurance sport that you test the mind, the will, just as much as I think it tests the body.
But that's the point, right? We do these things because they're hard.
Exactly.
Right? If it was easy, everybody would do it. Is kind of the colloquial saying, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I find like when you have like those weird challenges, that's when we do our best. My PR 70.3 to this day continues to be Atlantic City when it rained the whole freaking race. Like the swim was gorgeous. The bike was torrentially raining, electrical storm with sideways wind. And I was running like 85s in front and rear. So I was getting blown all over the place. So those are the only wheels I brought with me. And then the run, every cloud in the sky left. And it was, it's in Atlantic City. So if you've done any run in Atlantic City, you know that every run on that boardwalk is like the surface of the sun. But still, like that bike, I have the QOM on the Atlantic City Expressway from that bike in the freaking rain. And it's like, why? Because I just want it to be done with.
One thing I like to tell athletes is don't let weather or nutrition get in the way of your fitness. Mm-hmm. So if you're really prepared and really fit going into the race, prepared meaning you practice in the weather you're expecting, you practice your nutrition, just move on, adapt if something goes wrong, just learn how to, or don't learn how to adapt, just adapt to the condition and just know you're ready and you're prepared and just keep telling yourself you can do this and keep moving forward as best you can.
I think that's great advice. I always get a little like the hair on the back of my neck up when you talk to athletes who only train on the trainer or only are like nice weather athletes. It's like, what are you going to do when you show up and it's raining at the start line? It's like, I just talked about Atlantic City. I ran London Marathon a few years ago. It poured the whole race. To this day, it's my favorite marathon I've ever run, even though it was raining. But if you never train in it, then like, your shoes are going to be wet. Like it's rainy out. Your shoes are going to be wet. Get used to it. But if you're not used to it and prepared for it, then you're going to have a horrible race.
Well, and to not get into your own head, right? Everyone is dealing with the exact same conditions as you. So it's just who can adapt and adjust and keep moving forward the best. Right.
It's like, there are some races where it's like, you're going to lose a toenail. You've got 10. How many are you going to finish with? So we have been chatting for a very long time. This has been a fantastic conversation. Before we wrap up, is there anything we didn't cover that, like, as age group athletes talking to other age group athletes, you just want to make sure that people hear, especially if they're doing their first 70.3, their first Ironman?
Yes, there's something I'm sorry, I have to get out. This is huge. My first Ironman, and everybody talks about the why and things like that. Mm-hmm. And that is, I think, crucial. Who's your why? What's your why? And I think that's very, very important. And so you can get really hung up on that, and that gets you through the day, which is beautiful. But I'll tell you, my first Ironman, I had no idea really what I was really in for. And I mean, I as much as I wanted to prep for it, you couldn't get there. About half a mile from the finish line, I had this guy come up out of nowhere. Still to this day, don't know where he is. And he just looks at me. And back then they had different colored bracelets. So if it was your first time, you could ask for a different colored bracelet, and so it would identify you as a first timer. And so I had one. I was loud and proud about it. And so I had one. He comes up to me and he just looks at me and goes, "Enjoy that finish line. Enjoy that." And so it stuck with me and made me come back time after time at this point for half Ironman, full Ironman, any race. It's one of those things that there is that point where you come to the end. And I can tell you, having gone through it, anyone who's interested in the sport, I've said it time and time again, enjoy that finish line. Enjoy what you worked for.
Man, there is no feeling like when your foot hits that red carpet.
There's nothing like it. So yeah, that's.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I would say use the energy on the course. It's a long day and you're going to have highs. You'll have lows. There are volunteers. There are people around you. I have had many situations where I'm at a low point, but saying good job to another athlete, like you're looking good, or thanking a volunteer kind of helps change your energy. So use the energy on the course to your advantage, especially when you hit those rough spots.
And provide energy to others.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. When you see people struggling, like, we're all competing. Yes, it's a race. Yes, but we're all in it together too.
Absolutely.
And it's like when you see that guy who fell on the bike and is like trying to get his feet moving on the run because he traveled all the way from Munich. This isn't a real story or anything. Provide him the encouragement so that he gets up and gets it done. Because it helps us all.
Yeah. And I think what I wanted to say is, as a first timer, sometimes you just don't know how prepared you are until you cross the finish line. And so just really enjoy the process. The training is really important. Do the event. If you don't finish, learn from it. Don't let that beat you up. Don't let that not allow you to attempt to finish again. And then, as Justin mentioned, having a strong why. I always tell people, for longevity in the sport, I haven't missed a race in 33 years. You got to love it. You got to do what you love what you do. And that helps keep the why in motion, and that helps you keep focused and trying new things and just really enjoying the process.
Right. Camille, anything?
Yes, I'd like to follow up on what Justin said. And I would tell people not only to enjoy the finish line, but also the time before the race, setting the bike up and being there in the morning, getting ready, the slight nervousness, but excitement, and the mix of those two is a great feeling. And that's why I do this. I love doing it.
T1 at 4:30 in the morning is something else. Based on the looks on everyone's face, I think we all agree that T1 in the morning, 2 hours before race start, an hour before race start, it is an energy that is different from anything else. Like you said, Kamil, everyone's nervous, but there's excitement too.
And then the comparison from the morning, then to picking your bike up in the afternoon and seeing the atmosphere change. Those two moments were actually one of my favorites of the race.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everyone so much. Justin, Jenn, Kamil, and Wendy, thank you for coming on the show and sharing your experiences. This is age groupers talking to other age groupers about our personal experiences in our Ironman and what our takeaways are. I think it's absolutely fascinating that we've all done races. Some are earlier in our careers than others, and our experiences are really similar, but also really different at the same time, which I think just shows how individual the sport is, even though we're all doing the same course and experiencing the same conditions. So thank you very much. And for our listeners, stay tuned for episode 6, which will come up next week.